The stars looked different this far from Earth. Kyle Harrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the alien space station grow larger on the screen. 7 months of travel had brought them here, following radio signals that promised something incredible. They were about to meet aliens for the first time. The Vengeance was a battleship built for war. Its hull was thick metal designed to take hits. Its weapons could destroy other ships in seconds. The crew of 300 had trained for years, ready for anything. But nobody really knew what to expect from first contact. A light blinked on the communications panel. Amy Peterson looked up from her station, her eyes wide. She was young, only 25, but she was good at her job. "Captain, they're calling us." Kyle straightened his uniform. "Put them on screen." The alien appeared, and Kyle forced himself not to stare. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, with skin that looked like crystal. Light reflected off its surface in rainbow patterns. It had 4 eyes that blinked one at a time. When it spoke, the ship's computer translated the words into English. "I am Veltar. Welcome, humans from Earth. We have been waiting for you." Kyle nodded slowly. "I'm Kyle Harrison, commander of the ship. We come in peace. Your ship is..." "Interesting," Veltar said. There was something strange in his voice, like he was confused. "We have prepared rooms for you. We must talk about many things." A few hours later, Kyle walked through the alien station with Amy and Greg Marshall, his chief engineer. The place was beautiful, all curved walls and soft lights. Aliens stopped to look at them as they passed. Some seemed curious. Others looked worried. The council chamber was huge. Representatives from many different species sat in a circle, all watching as Kyle and his team walked to the center. Kyle felt like he was on trial. A floating alien that looked like a jellyfish wrapped in glowing cloth spoke first. "I am Mershaw, leader of this council. We have watched your world from far away. Your technology is impressive, but we must discuss something important." Kyle felt nervous. "What is it?" "Your ship is a weapon," Mershaw said. "A tool made for killing. We have not seen such things in thousands of years. Why do you come in peace but bring a ship made for war?" The room went silent. Kyle looked at Amy, then back at the council. "Our ship is military, yes, but we came in peace. In our part of space, we've faced threats. We learned that sometimes peace needs to be protected." Several aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. A lizard-like creature with changing scale colors spoke up. "Protected? Young species, you do not understand. Here all problems are solved by talking. War does not happen. It simply does not exist." Greg stepped forward. "That seems dangerous. What happens when someone doesn't want to talk?" "Then we stop trading with them until they change their minds," Mershaw explained. "Money pressure works every time. Violence is not needed." Kyle felt cold inside. Has the council ever faced a real threat? Something that couldn't be reasoned with? "Never," Velthar said proudly. "And we never will. The galaxy has moved beyond such primitive things." Later, back on the Vengeance, Amy said what they were all thinking. "They've never really been in danger, have they?" "No," Kyle said quietly. "And I don't know if that makes them lucky or vulnerable." News came from Earth a few days later. The council had accepted humanity into their group, but there were rules. Humans would have to get rid of most of their military ships. They would have to accept council ways of solving problems. They would have to let alien observers teach them how to be more civilized. Kyle read the report in his quarters and looked out at the stars. Something felt wrong. Peace was good, but peace without the ability to defend it seemed foolish. It was like leaving your door unlocked in a dangerous neighborhood because you believed everyone was good. He thought about Earth's history. Humans had fought terrible wars. They had almost destroyed themselves more than once. But they had learned from those dark times. They built weapons not because they loved violence, but because they understood that evil exists. Sometimes good people need to be strong to protect the weak. The council didn't understand this. They had been safe for so long that they forgot danger exists. Kyle accessed the ship's database and pulled up information about human military history. The Battle of Britain, where brave pilots defended their home against invasion. The Siege of Leningrad, where people suffered but never surrendered. The peacekeepers who stood between warring groups and saved lives. The Coast Guard rescuing people from storms. Humanity's military wasn't about conquest. It was about protection. It was about having the strength to help those who couldn't help themselves. It was about standing up to bullies and tyrants. The council saw the Vengeance as a weapon of aggression, but Kyle knew the truth. It was a shield. It was a promise that said, "We will protect the innocent. We will stand against evil. We will not let the strong prey on the weak. Over the next few weeks, Kyle attended countless meetings. The aliens were friendly but firm. They wanted humans to change, to become more like them. They talked about peace and cooperation and understanding. All good things, Kyle thought. But they never talked about what happens when peace fails. One day, Velthar came to visit the Vengeance. Kyle gave him a tour, showing him the weapon systems, the armor plating, the escape pods designed to save lives when things went wrong. You plan for disaster, Velthar observed. We hope for the best but prepare for the worst, Kyle replied. That's how we've survived. Perhaps you have survived because you expected threats. Perhaps if you expected peace, you would find it. Kyle stopped walking and looked at the alien. With respect, Ambassador, that's backwards. We prepare for threats because threats exist whether we believe in them or not. Hope doesn't stop bullets. Optimism doesn't defeat enemies. Strength does. Velthar was quiet for a moment. You sound very sure. I am. Because I've studied history. Every civilization that forgot how to defend itself was conquered by one that remembered. I hope I'm wrong about your counsel. I hope you stay safe forever. But hope isn't a strategy. That night, Kyle couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the peaceful aliens, living their safe lives, believing the universe was kind. He thought about the Vengeance and the other human warships that would be dismantled. He thought about what might happen if his fears were right. In his gut, he knew something bad was coming. The galaxy was too big, too old, too vast for there to be no threats at all. Somewhere out in the dark, something dangerous was waiting, and when it came, the Council would be helpless. Kyle hoped he was wrong, but he didn't believe he was. The lesson was coming, and it would be written in fire and blood and hard truth. The galaxy would learn that peace is precious but fragile, that civilization needs guardians, that sometimes the only thing standing between life and death is someone willing to fight. Humanity's warships had arrived. Soon the galaxy would understand why they were necessary. 3 months passed since Earth joined the Galactic Council. During that time, Kyle Harrison watched as his people slowly gave up their strength. 6 battleships were taken apart, their crews sent to work on cargo ships and science vessels. The Council was happy. They believed humanity was learning to be civilized. Kyle spent his days in meetings, talking about trade routes and cultural exchanges. It was important work, but part of him missed the clarity of military command. Everything made sense there. You had a mission, you had a crew, and you did your job. Politics were complicated and exhausting. That all changed on a Wednesday afternoon. Kyle was in a conference room with Velthar and some other diplomats when Amy burst through the door. Her face was pale and she was breathing hard. Commander, we have a big problem. Priority alert. Kyle excused himself and followed Amy into the hallway. What happened? One of the outer colonies, a planet called Paxtalia. They stopped responding. The last message was a distress call, but it got cut off after 8 seconds. Show me. In the operations center, they played the recording. The sound was broken and hard to hear, filled with screaming and weapons firing. Through all the noise, Kyle heard one clear sentence. They're here. The stories were true. The Ravagers have returned. Kyle felt his blood go cold. Ravagers? Velthar appeared in the doorway. For the first time since Kyle met him, the alien looked scared. It is an old story from before the Council was formed. A species that lived only to conquer and destroy. They were said to have been driven away beyond the edge of known space. Most of us thought they were just legends, stories our ancestors told to frighten children. But they're real, Kyle said. It wasn't a question. Perhaps. The Council is meeting now. Within an hour, Kyle stood in the Council chamber again, but everything was different. The confident, peaceful aliens looked shaken and uncertain. We should send diplomats, one counselor suggested. Perhaps we can negotiate with them. We should try economic pressure, another offered. Stop trading with them until they leave. Kyle listened in disbelief. Finally, he couldn't stay quiet anymore. With respect, counselors, you're talking about negotiating with an enemy that just destroyed an entire colony. While you're writing diplomatic letters, more people are going to die. Mershaw turned to face him. What would you suggest, Commander Harrison? Send a military force. At minimum, Send scouts to see what we're dealing with. The Council has no military force, Mershaw said simply. We have civilian patrol ships for rescues and traffic control. Nothing else. Then let me take the vengeance. We can reach Paxtalia in 2 days. The chamber erupted in argument. Many councilors objected, talking about protocol and proper procedure. Others stayed silent, their eyes drifting to the display showing where the destroyed colony had been. Finally, Velthar spoke. We have no other choice that can respond quickly. I suggest we authorize Commander Harrison to investigate. The vote was close, but it passed. 2 days later, the Vengeance arrived at the Paxtalia system. What they found made even the toughest crew members look away from their screens. The planet's surface was covered in huge craters. Cities that had stood for centuries were nothing but ash and burned ground. Orbiting the world were 6 ships, dark and angular, that seemed to swallow light instead of reflecting it. Life signs? Kyle asked, though he already knew the answer. None on the surface, Amy reported, her voice empty. The colony is gone. Population was 40 million. Greg pulled up sensor data on the alien ships. Commander, those ships are heavily armed. Their energy readings are off the charts. Each one is more powerful than us. Can we take all 6? Greg hesitated. Maybe, but it would be close and we'd be badly damaged. Kyle studied the tactical display. They could run back to the Council and report what they found, but if they did, these ships would move to the next target, and the next, and the Council would keep talking while worlds burned. Red alert. All hands to battle stations. Power up weapons and raise shields. The crew moved quickly and efficiently. Amy opened a communication channel to the alien vessels. Attention unknown ships. This is the Terran battleship Vengeance. You have attacked the Galactic Council. Power down your weapons and prepare to surrender. The response was immediate. All 6 ships turned toward the Vengeance, their weapons beginning to glow. Evasive maneuvers, Kyle ordered. Open fire. The Vengeance surged forward, its railguns firing with a sound like thunder. Humans had learned warfare the hard way, fighting wars in space that nearly destroyed their civilization. Every lesson, every tactic, every weapon had cost lives and blood. The Ravagers were about to learn what that meant. The first alien ship exploded under the attack, its shields unable to stop the heavy tungsten rounds traveling at incredible speed. The second ship tried to flank them, but the Vengeance's defensive lasers tore through its hull like paper. But the remaining 4 ships were learning, working together. Energy beams raked across the Vengeance's shields, making the ship shake violently. Shields at 60%, Greg called out. Hull breaches on decks 7 and 9. Kyle gripped his command chair. Target their engines, come around for another attack run. For 20 brutal minutes the battle continued. The Vengeance fought like its name suggested, dealing out destruction with cold efficiency. But the Ravager ships fought desperately, and the human vessel paid a price for every kill. When the last enemy ship finally broke apart in a series of explosions, the Vengeance was battered and scarred. Atmosphere was leaking from multiple holes in the hull. 14 crew members were dead. 38 were wounded. Kyle stared at the debris field, his jaw tight. Send a full report to the Council. Tell them this is just the beginning. Those ships were scouts testing defenses. The main force is still out there. Amy looked up from her station. Tears were running down her face. Commander, we just got a message from Council Space. 3 more colonies are under attack. Kyle closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what was coming. Set course for the nearest one. Maximum speed. Sir, we need repairs. We can't fight like this. We'll fight anyway, because if we don't, who will? As the Vengeance limped toward the next battle, Kyle thought about the Council's peace. It had been built on luck, not strength. The aliens had been safe for so long that they forgot danger exists. They had no warriors, no weapons, no way to defend themselves. Now the universe was reminding them of a harsh truth. Peace is not the natural state of things. Peace is something you have to fight for, protect, and maintain. Without strength, peace is just a pleasant dream that ends the moment someone violent comes along. The Council was about to learn this lesson, and Kyle knew it would be taught in the worst way possible, with death and suffering and the loss of innocence. But maybe, if humanity could hold the line long enough, the galaxy would survive this. Maybe the Council would learn to be strong without losing their goodness. Maybe they could find a balance between the violence humans knew so well and the peace the aliens valued so highly. It was a slim hope. But it was all they had. The Vengeance pushed its damaged engines to the limit, racing toward the next battle. Behind them, the ruins of Pax Talia floated in space, a silent monument to what happens when civilization forgets how to defend itself. Ahead, more battles waited, more death, more destruction. Kyle Harrison and his crew would face them all. Because that's what warriors do. They stand between the innocent and the darkness, no matter the cost. The holographic map in the council chamber showed red dots appearing one by one across known space. Each dot was a colony under attack or already destroyed. In just 5 days, the Ravagers had hit 12 worlds. Billions were dead. Kyle Harrison stood before the council, his uniform still dirty from the last fight. The Vengeance had saved 2 colonies but arrived too late at a third. He could still see that burning world in his mind, and it haunted him. The Ravagers are following a pattern, Kyle explained, pointing at the map. They hit isolated colonies first, places with weak defenses. They're avoiding the main worlds for now, but that won't last. Our analysis shows they're building strength, testing your response. Mershaw's glowing form seemed dimmer than before. We have moved 17 outer colonies to safer worlds. But, Commander, we do not have the ability to fight a war. Our entire civilization is built on the idea that war doesn't exist anymore. Then your civilization is built on a lie, Kyle said bluntly. Several counselors gasped, but he continued. I'm not trying to insult you. I'm trying to save lives. The Ravagers don't care about your principles or your peace. They only understand strength. A bird-like alien named Kirseth spoke up, her feathers ruffling. And what would you have us do, human? Build weapons? Train soldiers? Become violent like the primitive species we evolved past? No, Kyle replied. I'd have you survive. There's nothing primitive about defending your people. Velthar stepped forward. The human speaks truth even if it's uncomfortable. In 5 days, Commander Harrison and his crew have saved over 80 million lives. They've destroyed 17 Ravager vessels at great cost and with great courage. Meanwhile, we have done nothing but run and talk. We have sent diplomatic messages, Mershaw said weakly, which were answered with silence and more destruction, Velthar said. Counselors, I have studied Earth's history. They fought terrible wars, yes. Wars that almost destroyed them. But they learned from that darkness. Their military exists not to conquer, but to protect. Perhaps we were wrong to demand they disarm. The argument went on for hours. Finally, they reached a compromise. Earth would be allowed to bring its full military fleet through Council space. In exchange, human officers would train Council civilian crews in basic defense. Kyle immediately sent word to Earth. Within days, 6 more Terran battleships began the long journey to Council space. But it would take weeks for them to arrive. In the meantime, the Vengeance was joined by 2 Council cargo ships that had been quickly fitted with weapons. Amy Peterson led the training on one ship, a vessel called the Harmony's Gift. Its crew of 30 aliens had never held a weapon before. This is a plasma turret, Amy explained in the ship's armory. It's simple. Point at the target, press this trigger. The computer will help aim, but you need to lead fast-moving targets. A young alien named Lenvik raised a tentacle nervously. Lieutenant, I am a botanist. I study plants. How can you ask me to kill? Amy's expression softened. I was a musician before I joined the fleet. I played violin, but when my home was threatened, I learned to fight because there was no choice. You're not a killer, Lenvik. You're a protector. There's a difference. The training was rushed and far from perfect, but it was better than nothing. Greg worked day and night fitting Council ships with better shields and weapons made from spare parts. On the 8th day, the Ravagers made their boldest move. A fleet of 30 ships came out of deep space and headed straight for Veltris Prime, one of the Council's founding worlds. 6 billion people lived there. It was the symbolic heart of their civilization. The Vengeance and its 2 escort ships were the only military force close enough to respond. Kyle looked at the tactical display. 3 ships against 30. Those are terrible odds. Should we wait for help? Amy asked. By the time help arrives, Veltros Prime will be destroyed. We go now. Greg pulled up system diagnostics. I can give you maybe 70% combat capability. The repairs from the last battle aren't finished. Then we fight at 70%. Set course. Maximum speed. The 3 ships arrived at the Veltro system to find the Ravager fleet already attacking. Civilian stations were breaking apart. Escape pods scattered like seeds in the wind, people fleeing for their lives. All ships, this is Harrison. We're outnumbered 10-1, so we need to be smart. Focus fire on their big ships. Use the debris for cover. And remember, every minute we keep them busy is another minute for people to evacuate. The Harmony's Gift and its sister ship, Unity's Hope, moved into position. Their crews were terrified but determined, inspired by weeks of training and the example of their human teachers. The battle that followed would be remembered forever. The Vengeance tore through the Ravager fleet like a knife, its weapons working perfectly despite the damage. The human crew fought with desperate skill, using tactics the Ravagers had never seen. The 2 Council ships fought bravely. Their inexperienced crews rose to the challenge. Lenvik, the botanist, scored 3 hits that crippled a Ravager destroyer. A cargo handler named Tizara used her ship's tractor beam in a creative way that caused 2 enemy ships to crash into each other. But courage could only do so much against overwhelming numbers. Unity's Hope took a direct hit to its engine and exploded. 87 Council citizens died instantly, their first and last battle. The Harmony's Gift was badly damaged, its shields failing. Amy's voice came over the communication system, strained but steady. Vengeance were done. Engines offline. Weapons at 20%. Get your crew to the escape pods, Kyle ordered. You did good, Amy, get out. Negative, Commander. We can still shoot. We're staying. On the Harmony's Gifts bridge, Lenvik looked at Amy with eyes full of fear and determination. For my world, Lieutenant? Amy nodded, her hands steady on the controls. For all our worlds. The Vengeance pushed deeper into the enemy formation, its hull glowing from heat and weapon impacts. Kyle knew they couldn't win, couldn't kill all 30 ships, but they could buy time. Every Ravager ship they destroyed was one less attacking the planet. Then, when everything seemed lost, space itself tore open with brilliant light. 6 Terran battleships appeared, their weapons already firing. They had pushed their engines beyond safe limits to arrive early. The tide turned in minutes. The Ravagers, caught between the wounded Vengeance and the fresh human fleet, broke formation and ran. Those that tried to fight were systematically destroyed. When the battle ended, Kyle slumped in his chair, exhausted. The Vengeance had taken catastrophic damage. Half the ship was open to space, but they had held the line. On Veltro's Prime, 6 billion people looked up at the sky where human ships burned bright and understood something profound. Peace was precious, but it needed guardians. Sometimes the price of civilization was paid in blood and courage. In the council chamber, Mersha spoke to the assembled representatives with a changed voice. We have been naive. Our long peace made us forget the universe is not always kind. Today, humans taught us there is no shame in defending what we love. I propose we formally request Earth's help in creating a galactic defense force. The vote was unanimous. Velthar found Kyle in the medical bay of the Vengeance, where he was visiting the wounded. You saved us, Commander. Not just the planet, but our entire way of thinking. We were wrong to ask you to disarm. Kyle shook his head. You weren't wrong to want peace. You were just wrong about how to keep it. Peace isn't weakness, but it needs strength to survive. We understand that now, Velthar said quietly. The hard way. Kyle looked around at the wounded crew members, human and alien alike. That's usually how these lessons are learned. I just wish it didn't have to cost so much. Over the next weeks, the galaxy changed rapidly. Human military doctrine was shared with council species. Training academies were established. Shipyards began producing vessels designed for defense. The age of innocence was over, replaced by something harder but more realistic. Humanity's warships had arrived, and the galaxy learned that fear had 2 faces. There was the fear of predators who hunt the weak, and there was the fear felt by those predators when they met something stronger. The council had learned to create the second kind of fear, the kind that protected rather than threatened. It was a painful lesson, but it was one that would save countless lives in the years to come. 6 months after the defense of Veltro's Prime, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before. The peaceful union of trading partners was now a civilization at war, learning hard lessons about survival. Kyle Harrison had been promoted to admiral and given command of the new Galactic Defense Force. His flagship was still the Vengeance, now fully repaired and upgraded with technology from multiple Council species. The ship combined human military knowledge with alien science, creating something more powerful than either could achieve alone. The war room aboard the Vengeance showed the current situation. The Ravagers had launched a full invasion, bringing dozens of massive warships from beyond the galactic edge. They had taken control of 3 star systems and were using them as bases to attack deeper into Council space. Admiral Kyle Harrison stood before a holographic map, surrounded by his command staff. Amy Peterson, now a full commander, served as his second-in-command. Greg Marshall had become head of technology for the entire Defense Force. With them were officers from various Council species, each learning the art of war that humanity had perfected through centuries of painful experience. Intelligence reports show the Ravagers gathering for a major attack, Amy said, highlighting an area of space. We think they're targeting the Corvette shipyards. If they capture those facilities, they'll be able to build ships using our technology. A reptilian officer named Sekvar nodded. My people agree. We estimate they'll attack within 72 hours. Kyle studied the map. What forces do we have in that area? 4 battle groups, Greg replied. 30 ships total. Mix of human and Council vessels, but intelligence suggests the Ravagers will bring at least 50 ships. Then we need to be smarter, not just stronger. Kyle moved ship icons around the display. We can't fight them head-on, but we can use the asteroid field near Corvesh to our advantage. Over the next 3 days, the Defense Force prepared. Ships took hidden positions throughout the asteroid field. Sensor devices were placed to track enemy movements. Weapon platforms were built on the larger asteroids. When the Ravagers arrived, they came with overwhelming force. 63 ships bristling with weapons. But as they moved toward the shipyards, they found themselves surrounded by a carefully prepared trap. The battle lasted 8 hours. The Defense Force used hit-and-run tactics, striking from cover and retreating before the Ravagers could respond effectively. Human pilots flew small fighters through the asteroid field with reckless courage. Council crews trained by human instructors coordinated their attacks with new precision. The Ravagers lost 40 ships before retreating. The Defense Force lost 7, including 2 human battleships. It was a victory, but an expensive one. After the battle, Kyle walked through the medical bay, visiting the wounded. He stopped at the bedside of a young pilot named Chris Webb, who had saved a transport full of civilians by ramming his damaged fighter into a Ravager bomber. You did good, Lieutenant, Kyle said quietly. You saved 300 lives, Chris managed a weak smile. That's what we do, sir. We save people. Kyle felt the weight of those words. That was what humanity had brought to the galaxy. Not conquest or domination, but the willingness to sacrifice for strangers, to stand between the innocent and the darkness. But the war was taking its toll on everyone. Back on Earth, factories worked day and night making weapons and warships. The human population, once reluctant about military expansion, now understood why it was necessary. Recruitment centers had waiting lists months long. The Council species were adapting too. The Paxtal, with their multiple tentacles, proved excellent at operating weapons. The crystalline Velthari, with their ability to process information rapidly, became exceptional tactical officers. Even the peaceful plant-based Koravi found a role, using their knowledge of biology to develop medical techniques that saved countless lives. But there were darker changes as well. 8 months into the war, reports came back of atrocities. A captured Ravager ship had its crew killed in revenge for earlier attacks. Prisoners were being mistreated. The line between defense and vengeance was becoming unclear. Kyle addressed the entire fleet in a recorded message broadcast to every ship. I know you're angry, he said. I know you've lost friends, family, entire worlds. But we cannot become what we fight against. The Ravagers are monsters because they choose to be. We're better than that. Every prisoner will be treated with dignity. Every enemy death will be mourned as a waste of life. We fight not because we love violence, but because we love what we protect. Commander Amy Peterson watched the broadcast from the bridge, then turned to Velthar, who had joined the Defense Force as an advisor. Do you think it's possible to fight a war and keep your soul? Your people seem to manage it, Velthar replied. Humanity has fought so many wars, yet you still value peace above all. That is why the Council was wise to accept your help. You understand both the need for violence and its terrible cost. The months continued to grind on. The Ravagers were slowly being pushed back, but at tremendous cost. Entire fleets clashed in battles that lit up space with fire and fury. Planets were evacuated. Colonies were abandoned. The death count climbed into the billions. 1 year into the war, the tide finally began to turn. The Defense Force had grown to over 200 ships, crewed by warriors from 40 different species. Human tactics had been adapted by alien minds, creating new strategies the Ravagers couldn't counter. In a decisive battle near the Galactic core, Admiral Kyle Harrison led a combined fleet against the Ravagers' main supply base. The fighting was brutal, with ships exchanging fire at point-blank range. But when it ended, the Ravagers' ability to supply their forces had been destroyed. Standing on the bridge of the Vengeance, looking at the debris field that represented thousands of ended lives, Kyle felt no triumph. "Only exhaustion and sadness, Admiral," Amy said softly. "We're receiving messages from 3 Ravager clan leaders. They want to talk about surrender." Kyle nodded slowly. "Arrange a meeting. It's time to end this." But even as he spoke, he knew the war had changed the galaxy forever. The age of innocence was over. The Council species had learned about violence, about sacrifice, about the hard choices that came with survival. They had learned about war. And in learning, they had lost something precious that could never be fully recovered. Kyle looked out at the stars, wondering if humanity had done the galaxy a favor or caused harm by teaching these lessons. But in his heart, he knew the truth. The Ravagers had forced this change. Humanity had simply provided the tools to survive it. The question now was, what kind of galaxy would emerge from the ashes? In his quarters that night, Kyle pulled up casualty reports. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of military personnel dead, billions of civilians killed in the attacks, entire species reduced to fragments of their former populations. And for what? Because one violent species decided to prey on the peaceful. Because evil exists in the universe and good people must sometimes fight to stop it. Kyle thought about the Council before the war, so confident in their peaceful ways. They had been naive, yes, but there was something beautiful about that naivety, something worth protecting. Now they were warriors hardened by battle. They had lost their innocence but gained the strength to survive. It was a fair trade, Kyle supposed, but it still felt like a loss. He fell asleep thinking about Earth, about the home he hadn't seen in over a year. He dreamed of a time before war, before the Ravagers, before everything changed. In his dream, the galaxy was at peace, and humanity's warships were nothing more than museum pieces, relics of a violent past. But then he woke to the sound of alarms, another battle beginning, and the dream faded like morning mist. 2 years after the Ravagers first emerged from the void, the war finally ended, not with a grand final battle, but with exhausted enemies sitting across a table from each other. Admiral Kyle Harrison stood in the neutral station built for the peace talks, looking through the window at the gathered fleets. Human ships, council vessels, and even a handful of Ravager warships hung in space, their weapons powered down but still present. A reminder that peace was built on the foundation of strength. The negotiations had taken 3 months. The Ravagers were not one united empire but dozens of clans, each led by warlords who valued strength above all else. Convincing them to accept peace had required demonstrating that the Council, backed by human military power, could not be conquered. The final treaty was simple. The Ravagers would be given 3 star systems at the edge of Council space where they could settle. In exchange, they would stop all attacks and accept monitoring stations to ensure they kept their word. It wasn't perfect, but it would work. Commander Amy Peterson approached Kyle as he watched the ships. "The last signatures are being added to the treaty." "It's really over, for now," Kyle replied. "Peace is never permanent. It has to be maintained." That's a cheerful thought. Kyle smiled slightly. "I'm not trying to be negative, just realistic. We've taught the Council how to fight. Now we need to teach them how to stay alert without losing who they are." In the Council chamber on Veltros Prime, the mood was heavy despite the peace. High Counselor Mershaw addressed the assembled representatives, its glowing form dimmer than it had been before the war. "We have survived," Mershaw said, "but the galaxy we knew is gone. We were a civilization built on trust and cooperation. The war has forced us to become something else. Velthar stood. We have become survivors. We have learned that peace is not the natural state of the universe, but something that must be protected. Humanity taught us this lesson. At what cost? Asked Kirseth, the bird-like counselor. Her feathers were gray now, aged by stress. We have lost our innocence. Our children now train for war. Our resources go to building weapons. Have we truly won? Or have we simply become like those we fought? Kyle, invited to attend the session, spoke up. Counselor Kirseth, I understand your concern. Earth went through something similar centuries ago. We built weapons that could destroy our world many times over. We almost used them. But we learned something important. Having the capacity for violence doesn't mean you must be violent. It means you have a choice. And how do we ensure we make the right choice? Mersha asked. By remembering why you fight, Kyle answered. You don't build weapons because you love war. You build them because you love peace enough to defend it. The difference matters. The Council voted to establish a permanent defense force, but with strict civilian oversight. Humans would continue as military advisors, but gradually, Council species would take command positions. The goal was to create a force that could protect the galaxy without dominating it. 6 months after the treaty signing, Kyle stood on the bridge of the Vengeance for the last time. He was being recalled to Earth, his mission complete. Command of the defense force would pass to Sekvar, the reptilian officer who had proven himself a brilliant commander during the war. Greg was already back on Earth, helping design new ships that would serve both human and Council needs. Amy, now a full captain, would remain as second in command of the defense force, making sure the lessons humanity taught wouldn't be forgotten. Kyle walked the corridors of his ship one last time, remembering the battles fought, the lives lost, the impossible victories. The Vengeance bore the scars of war. Patched hull plates, replaced systems, memorial walls for fallen crew members. In the ship's memorial hall, Kyle stopped before a wall of names. 14 crew members lost in the first battle against the Ravagers. 378 more lost over the course of the war. Each name represented a person who had chosen to stand between civilization and destruction. They'll be remembered, Velthar said behind him, not just by humans but by every species in the Council. They died for people they had never met. They died for people, Kyle corrected. The galaxy is just rocks and stars. People are what matter. A very human perspective, Velthar said with what might have been a smile. We are grateful for it. Back on Earth, Kyle returned to a changed world. Humanity had fully integrated into the Galactic Council, bringing their technology, culture, and hard-won wisdom. Earth cities now hosted aliens from dozens of species. Human children grew up learning alien languages. The cultural exchange was transforming both humanity and the Council. But there were tensions too. Some humans resented the military buildup, wanting to return to peaceful exploration. Others had become too enamored with humanity's new role as the galaxy's protectors, pushing for aggressive expansion of the defense force. Kyle found himself speaking at universities, military academies, and government assemblies, trying to explain the lessons learned. We didn't bring war to the galaxy, he told a crowd of young cadets at the Naval Academy. War found the galaxy on its own. What we brought was the knowledge of how to fight and when to fight and why to fight. But most importantly, we brought the knowledge of when to stop fighting. A young cadet raised her hand. Sir, do you think we'll face another threat like the Ravagers? Kyle considered the question carefully. Probably. The universe is vast and old. There will always be dangers. But the galaxy is ready now. The Council species aren't naive anymore. They understand that peace requires vigilance. And that's the real victory. Not defeating the Ravagers, but building a civilization strong enough to face whatever comes next. Years passed. The Defense Force proved its worth several times, stopping pirates, stopping conflicts before they started, and responding to disasters across the galaxy. The feared militarization of Council space never happened. Instead, a balance emerged. Strength tempered by wisdom, vigilance balanced with trust. Kyle Harrison, now retired, lived quietly on Earth with Amy, who had also returned home. They sometimes watched the stars and thought about the galaxy they had helped shape. One evening, a young reporter came to interview Kyle for a documentary about the Ravager War. Admiral Harrison, the reporter asked, when the Vengeance first arrived at the Council station, the aliens were afraid of humanity's warships. Do you think they were right to be afraid? Kyle thought about the question for a long time before answering. Fear isn't always wrong, he finally said. A warship should inspire fear because it represents immense destructive power. But fear of what? That's the question. The council feared we were conquerors. What they learned was that we were protectors. Our ships didn't bring fear to the innocent. They brought fear to those who would harm the innocent. And yes, that kind of fear is healthy. It's the fear that keeps predators in check and allows civilization to flourish. So humanity's arrival changed the galaxy? The galaxy was always going to change, Kyle replied. The Ravagers made sure of that. What humanity did was help ensure the change didn't mean the end of everything good. We taught the Council how to survive. They taught us that survival isn't enough. You have to know what you're surviving for. The reporter left and Kyle returned to watching the stars. Somewhere up there, the Vengeance still served in the Defense Force, now commanded by a Council captain with a human first officer. Somewhere, Council species and humans worked side by side, building a future together. Humanity's warships had arrived and taught the galaxy the meaning of fear. But in the end, they had taught something more important. That fear could be the beginning of wisdom. That those who wielded power had a responsibility to use it justly. That peace was not weakness, but the result of strength applied with restraint. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and it would never forget. Peace was not the absence of weapons or the inability to fight. Peace was the choice to build rather than destroy, to protect rather than conquer, to stand together rather than fall apart. That was humanity's true gift to the stars. Not fear, but the wisdom that came after.